Welcome to Bias Breakdown. I'm your host, Kara Rucker. Two women from Honduras living in the U.S. illegally were deported last week. With them on their way out were their children, born in the U.S. and therefore American citizens. It's an immigration case garnering a lot of attention and raising legal questions. The media coverage has been divided. Were U.S. citizen children deported by the Trump administration, as you may have read in some news headlines? Or is the media's reporting on who got deported misleading? Left-leaning outlets are emphasizing the advocates who say the children never should have left the U.S. Right-leaning outlets are focusing on the government's position that minors can accompany deported parents if that's their wishes. The case is now moving through the courts. And as it does, different news sources are highlighting the angles that align with their political lean. That's the focus of today's Bias Breakdown.
Join Straight Arrow News. See the slant, avoid the bias. When others skew the facts, we give you the truth down the center. Welcome to Bias Breakdown.
First, I'll show you how some of the headlines read from news outlets rated as having a left or right political bias. The headlines reveal just how differently this case was framed depending on the political lens. And as the story developed, so did the contrasting narratives. First, headlines from outlets on the left, from the Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC. 3 U.S. citizens, ages 2, 4, and 7, swiftly deported from Louisiana. 3 children who are U.S. citizens, including one with cancer, deported with their mothers, lawyers and advocacy groups say. And 4-year-old with cancer among 3 American kids removed from U.S. by ICE, lawyers say. You'll notice in these headlines, news outlets are emphasizing what the migrant attorneys and advocates are saying about the case. Some of the headlines leave out that the children went with their deported mothers. And some are highlighting the child with cancer in its coverage of the immigration case, a detail right-leaning media largely didn't emphasize. Let's compare these headlines to coverage from outlets on the right, like the New York Post, Breitbart, and Daily Caller. Rubio, Holman dispute misleading accusations Trump admin deported kids to parents' country of origin. They went with their mothers. Rubio decries Washington Post misleading headline, 3 U.S. citizen children were not deported. And just not true. Marco Rubio calls out misleading reports about recent deportations of 3 U.S. citizen children. The headlines read opposite from left-leaning outlets, emphasizing the Trump administration's response to media reports about the case and dismissing accusations of the children being deported. This is just the beginning of conflicting takeaways. Left and right media in disagreement over whether the kids were deported. There's also conflict over how they interpret the case in a broader picture. Outlets on the left suggest it's an example of due process violations amid mass deportations, while those on the right argue the Trump administration is fulfilling its promise to enforce the law and deport people here illegally. Here are examples from news outlets on the left echoing concerns over due process. The Washington Post wrote, "The cases have renewed concerns that the Trump administration's expedited deportations are violating the due process rights of both citizens and non-citizens." Axios wrote, "The cases pile onto the legal and ethical questions that have surrounded the Trump administration's push to deport immigrants, and in this case, remove U.S. citizens with little or no due process." Takeaways from right-leaning media read differently. The New York Post wrote, "President Trump has been keen on carrying out deportations across the country expeditiously. Trump's team has also been fighting in the courts to end birthright citizenship, the policy under the 14th Amendment of automatically granting citizenship to anyone born in the U.S. Backers of his effort believe that ending birthright citizenship will eliminate a key incentive for illegal migrants to enter the U.S. The Daily Caller wrote, Holman said Monday that he is satisfied with the 139,000 deportations that have occurred thus far since January 20th and praised the record low drop in border encounters since Trump took office. Just 1 month into Trump's second term, border encounters reached the lowest numbers since the 1960s. You can see how easy it is for people to be so divided on important issues. The divide in media coverage, reflecting the nation's political divide. News outlets emphasizing facts to prop up one side over the other, building a case as if their viewers are the jury, persuading one way or the other that the Trump administration was right or wrong over the children leaving the country with their mothers. Now that you've seen conflicting narratives from left and right media, let's get to the facts of the immigration cases. Keep in mind, this is an ongoing legal process, and this is just what we've learned so far from documents available. Two unrelated women from Honduras, who court docs say had been living in the U.S. illegally and were detained by ICE in New Orleans on April 22nd and 24th. One has a 2-year-old. The other has a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. Friday, April 25th, both Honduran mothers were deported back to their country with their children. One day before the deportations, one of the family's attorneys filed a petition to the court for a temporary restraining order to prevent the 2-year-old from leaving the U.S. According to an attorney representing the 2-year-old American citizen, the child identified as VML has a custodian, Trish Mack, ready and willing to exercise her delegated custodial authority for VML. Miss Mack is a family friend, her custodian as appointed by VML's father. The family attorney says Melissa Harper, an ICE official, refused to honor a request to release VML, stating that it was not needed because VML was already with her mother. The ICE official stated that the father could try to pick her up, but that he would also be taken into custody. Before that order was ruled on, the two families left the country Friday, April 25th. Here's what the attorneys for the government said in response to the restraining order filed. The mother, Ms. Lopez Villela, made known to ICE officials that she wanted to retain custody of VML. U.S. attorneys saying they have a handwritten letter from Ms. Lopez Villela with the translation, "I, Jenny Carolina Lopez Villela, will bring my daughter VML with me to Honduras." U.S. attorneys say VML is in the custody of her legal custodian, her mother, and say there was no proof of identities provided to ICE from the individuals wanting custody. The government saying the child's mother is the only known legal custodian who indicated she wanted to retain custody. That day, a judge ruled the administration would need to further explain its course of action and set a hearing date. Here's what the judge wrote. It is illegal and unconstitutional to deport, detain for deportation, or recommend deportation of a U.S. citizen. The government contends that this is all okay because the mother wishes that the child be deported with her, but the court doesn't know that. The judge indicated the court requested a phone call, but was told that wasn't possible because the mother, and presumably the child, were released in Honduras. The judge writing, "In the interest of dispelling our strong suspicion that the government just deported a U.S. citizen with no meaningful process, it is ordered that the matter be set for a hearing at 9 a.m. on May 16th. So here you've seen the family attorney's argument, the government's argument, and a judge using language in his order that shows skepticism over ICE's actions, but requesting a future hearing to understand more details in the case. The case has been front and center in the media since. Whether you can classify the U.S. citizen children as deported or whether they rightfully left with their mothers who were deported is a question being asked to the courts. And to Trump officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and border czar Tom Homan on this weekend's NBC and CBS Sunday shows.
3 U.S. citizens, ages 4, 7, and 2, were not deported. Their mothers, who are legally in this country, were deported. The children went with their mothers. If those children are U.S. citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like, you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
No U.S. citizen child was deported. Deported means you got to be deported by an immigration judge. We don't deport U.S. citizens.
The mother was deported along with the children.
The children aren't deported. The mother chose to take the children with her. When you enter the country illegally and you know you're here illegally and you choose to have a U.S. citizen child, that's on you. That's not on this administration. If you choose to put your family in that position, that's on them. But having a U.S. citizen child after you enter this country legally, It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It doesn't make you immune from our laws.
And on the other side of the aisle, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and an ACLU attorney in Louisiana slammed the process, saying the Trump admin is deporting U.S. citizen children and violating due process.
What he's doing here is just outrageous and against every iota of what Americans believe. And this is not the only instance. There are reportedly other instances where U.S. citizen children were deported without any due process. Due process is a hallmark of what our country is all about, rule of law, and ICE and Trump seem to break it in every single way. He believes he's a king. He is not.
Deportation, Donald, is not allowing any due process for families in the state of Louisiana or anywhere else in this nation. So I just want to share that families in Louisiana are being disappeared.
The conflicting reports and noise in the media over this court case was the subject of a Tuesday segment on The Breakfast Club, with radio host Charlemagne the God criticizing outlets not providing a full picture of the case and emphasizing one side over the other.
I do think when the media has that conversation, we can't rage bait, though. Because, every time they say it, they'll be like, oh, a 2-year-old got deported, a 3-year-old got deported, but they're not telling the whole story of their parent was here illegally, and so the parent got deported, and so they sent the child with them. Because when I hear it, I'm like, why the hell would they deport a 2-year-old? Why would they deport some child with cancer? But then there's a whole other story that goes with it. The only reason I think that, media should be completely honest and tell the whole totality of the story is because that's when people, label things fake news.
The media is largely highlighting and reporting the side of the immigration case that aligns with a political narrative. If a viewer or reader was to only get information from a left-leaning source, you may not know the mothers of the children were deported due to not being in the country legally. And ICE officials say the mothers wanted their children to go with them. And if you were to only get information from a right-leaning source, you may not have heard immigration lawyers say family members were trying to transfer custody of at least one U.S. citizen child to someone else so they could stay in the U.S., and a restraining order was filed prior to their flights out. The case is still playing out in the courts, with a hearing scheduled for May 16th. But by the framing of the facts by news outlets on the left and right, a viewer could have been guided to a conclusion based on the political persuasion of a news outlet. And that's your bias breakdown. Hey, thanks for watching this week's episode. We're trying to tell news stories a little differently here by giving you the facts of a story, but also showing where other media may be missing the mark due to biases seeping into news reporting these days. For more episodes like this, you can search for Bias Breakdown wherever you listen to your podcast. Thanks so much for those of you who have been leaving feedback for the show. As you can probably tell, we're choosing story topics that are largely controversial and tackling them head on. There's a lot of information in this case, just as last week's episode over Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I didn't get to all of the details again here, but hopefully covered the ones that told a full enough picture while the case continues to play out. I'm linking all official, original court documents I've got to our news article for you to review for yourself if you'd like to. Thanks so much to Ian Kennedy, our video editor, and Allie Caldwell on our graphics. And thank you for watching Bias Breakdown. I'll see you next time.